The morning alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every day for the past 3 years. Rosa rolled out of her small bed and looked at herself in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of another sleepless night. Another night spent worrying about bills and her mother's medical expenses. She pulled her long black hair into the same tight bun she wore every day, making sure not a single strand would fall out during her shift. The gray uniform hung loose on her thin frame. She had lost weight over the years, not from choice, but from skipping meals to make sure her family had enough to eat. The walk to CAF Harmony took 20 minutes through the busy streets of downtown. Rosa kept her head down, watching her worn out shoes hit the pavement with each step. People rushed past her in expensive suits and designer clothes, talking loudly on their phones about business deals and vacation plans. She might as well have been invisible at the cafe. Rosa tied her apron and started her routine. First, she wiped down all the tables, arranged the chairs perfectly, and made sure every sugar dispenser was full. The cafe was fancy, the kind, a place where a single cup of coffee cost more than what she spent on groceries for a whole day. The morning rush began at 7. Lawyers, doctors, and business executives flooded in, all wanting their usual orders. Rosa had memorized every regular customer's preference. The man in the blue suit always wanted a double espresso with no sugar. The woman with the red purse ordered a cappuccino with extra foam. They never bothered to learn her name, but she knew exactly how they liked their coffee. "Excuse me, miss," called out a customer from table 6. Rosa hurried over, notepad ready. "This coffee is cold. Bring me a fresh one." Rosa nodded quietly and took the cup away. She had learned not to argue, not to defend herself, even when the coffee was perfectly hot. It was easier to just fix whatever they complained about and move on. During her break, Rosa always found herself staring at the piano in the corner of the cafe. It was beautiful, a shiny black grand piano that looked like it belonged in a concert hall, not a coffee shop. A white cloth covered it most of the time, protecting it from dust and spills. She had never seen anyone play it. Not once in all her years working there. The piano reminded her of another life, a life that felt like a distant dream now. When she was 8 years old, her father had saved up for months to buy her a small keyboard. He worked 2 jobs just to pay for her piano lessons with Mrs. Peterson, the old lady who lived 3 blocks away. "Music is in your blood, little one," her father used to say, watching her practice scales after school. "Your grandmother was a pianist too. She played in the church every Sunday." Rosa had been good, really good. By the time she was 12, she was playing pieces that students twice her age struggled with. Her teacher entered her in competitions, and she won several medals. The high school music director had already talked to her parents about scholarships to music school, but life had other plans. When Rosa was 15, her father got sick. The doctor said it was his heart, weakened by years of hard work and stress. The medical bills piled up like snow in winter. Her mother worked as a house cleaner, but it wasn't enough. Rosa started working part-time jobs after school first. At a grocery store, then at a fast food restaurant. The piano lessons stopped first. Then she had to sell the keyboard to help pay for her father's medication. The music scholarship she had dreamed about became impossible when she realized she would need to work full-time after high school to support her family. Her father passed away 2 years later. Rosa's mother never recovered from the grief and stress. She developed diabetes and high blood pressure, conditions that required expensive medication and regular doctor visits. Rosa's younger brother, Diego, was only 10 when their father died. He needed school supplies, clothes, and food. He needed a normal childhood, even if Rosa couldn't have one. So Rosa put away her musical dreams and focused on survival. She found the job at CAF Harmony through a friend who knew someone who worked there. The pay was better than most places, especially with tips from the wealthy customers. It was enough to keep the family afloat. Barely every day at the cafe was the same routine: serve coffee, clear tables, smile politely, stay invisible. The customers talked around her like she wasn't there, discussing their lives, their problems, their successes. Sometimes they complained about their children's piano lessons being too expensive. or how their teenager didn't appreciate the music education they were paying for. Rosa would listen and nod, remembering what it felt like to have such opportunities. The hardest part was seeing the piano every day. Sometimes when the cafe was quiet and she was cleaning nearby, she would lift the corner of the white cloth and look at the keys. Her fingers would twitch, remembering the feeling of pressing down on ivory keys, creating music that filled a room with emotion and beauty. Late at night, after her shift ended, and she walked home through the empty streets, Rosa would hum melodies. In her head, pieces by Chopin, Mozart, and Bach that she had memorized years ago and never forgotten. The music was still there, locked away inside her, waiting for a chance to come out. At home, her mother would be asleep in her chair, the television still on. Diego would be at the kitchen table, doing homework by the light of a single lamp. Rosa would help him with math problems and make sure he had clean clothes for school the next day, as then she would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, dreaming about the piano at the cafe. She imagined what it would feel like to sit at that bench, to place her hands on those keys, to fill the empty space with music, instead of the constant chatter about stock prices and business meetings. In her dreams, she played for an audience that actually listened, that appreciated the emotion and skill that went into every note. But dreams don't pay bills or buy groceries or cover medical expenses. So every morning, Rosa got up, put on her uniform, and walked to the cafe to serve coffee to people who would never know that they were being served by someone who once dreamed of playing piano in concert halls. The piano remained covered, silent, waiting. And Rosa remained invisible, serving others while her own talents stayed hidden beneath the surface of her everyday life. She had accepted this reality, or at least she thought she had. She told herself that some dreams are meant to stay dreams, that some people are meant to serve while others are meant to be served. But deep inside, in a place she tried not to visit too often, the music was still alive. It waited patiently, like a seed buried in winter soil, ready to grow if given the right conditions. Rosa didn't know it yet, but those conditions were about to present themselves in a way she never could have imagined. Thursday evening started like any other night at Caf Harmony. Rosa had been working since the morning shift, covering for another waitress who had called in sick. Her feet ached in her old shoes, and she could feel the familiar tiredness settling into her bones. But she needed the extra hours, especially with Diego's school field trip coming up next week. The cafe looked different on cultural night. Mr. Davidson, the owner, had dimmed the regular lights and put up small decorations around the room. Candles flickered on each table, creating shadows that danced on the walls. The usual business crowd was replaced by people in fancy clothes, the kind Rosa only saw in magazines. For once, the white cloth had been removed from the piano. It stood in the corner like a sleeping giant, its black surface reflecting the candlelight. Rosa couldn't help but steal glances at it as she moved between tables, serving wine and expensive appetizers to the well-dressed customers. "Tonight, we have a special treat," Mr. Davidson announced to the room, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who rarely got to host events like this. "Please welcome Tyler Chen, a talented young pianist from the City Conservatory." The audience clapped politely as a young man in his early 20s walked toward the piano. He wore a perfectly pressed black suit and moved with the confidence of someone who had performed many times before. Rosa watched from behind the counter, her heart beating faster as he sat down at the bench and adjusted his position. When Tyler began to play, the entire cafe transformed. The conversation stopped. The clinking of glasses faded away, and even the coffee machine seemed to quiet down. The music flowed through the room like water, smooth and effortless. Rosa recognized the piece immediately. It was a Mozart sonata she had learned when she was 16. One of the last pieces she had mastered before everything changed. As Tyler played, Rosa found herself moving her fingers along with the melody, her muscle memory still intact after all these years. She could feel every note in her body, could anticipate each phrase before it happened. It was beautiful, but it also hurt in a way she couldn't explain. Watching someone else play the music she had once dreamed of performing felt like looking through a window at a life she could never have. The first piece ended to enthusiastic applause. Tyler smiled and bowed slightly before launching into his second selection, a more complex piece by Rachmaninoff. Rosa was so absorbed in the music that she almost forgot she was supposed to be working. She stood frozen by the counter completely. Lost in the performance, it was during the final piece. A gentle Chopin waltz. That disaster struck. Tyler had been playing for about 30 minutes when he stood up to acknowledge the audience's applause. As he rose from the bench, his elbow knocked against the wine glass that someone had placed on top of the piano during intermission. Asha. Rosa watched in horror as the glass tumbled in slow motion, red wine spilling across the pristine keys and seeping into the gaps between them. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by Tyler's gasp of dismay. The red wine continued to drip from the keys onto the floor, each drop echoing in the suddenly silent room. Mr. Davidson rushed forward, his face pale with panic. "Oh no, oh no," Tyler kept repeating, his hands shaking as he tried to wipe the wine with his handkerchief. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see the glass there." Mr. Davidson grabbed napkins from the nearest table and began dabbing at the piano keys. But the wine had already seeped deep into the instrument. When Tyler tried to continue playing, the keys produced only muffled, distorted sounds. Some keys stuck completely, while others made strange clicking noises. The audience began to murmur among themselves. Rosa could hear snippets of conversation. "What a shame, poor boy. Is the piano ruined?" The elegant evening was falling apart before everyone's eyes. Mr. Davidson pulled out his phone and started making frantic calls to piano repair services.
Ow.
But it was almost 9 o'clock on a Thursday night and most businesses were closed. The few that answered said they couldn't come out until the next day at the earliest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Davidson announced, his voice strained with embarrassment, "I'm afraid we're having some technical difficulties. We'll have to end tonight's performance early. Please, enjoy some complimentary dessert while we figure this out." Rosa watched as the disappointment spread across the room. Some people were already gathering their purses and coats, clearly planning to leave. Others looked sympathetic but uncertain about what to do. Tyler stood beside the damaged piano looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. This was supposed to be Mr. Davidson's big night, his chance to establish the cafe as a cultural destination. Rosa had heard him talking about it for weeks, planning every detail, hoping to attract more upscale customers. Now it was all falling apart because of one spilled glass of wine. Rosa felt her heart breaking, not just for Mr. Davidson or Tyler, but for the piano itself. The beautiful instrument that had sat silent for so long was finally being used for its intended purpose. And now it was damaged and voiceless again. It felt too familiar, too much like her own story of dreams interrupted. By circumstances beyond her control, she couldn't stand to watch anymore. While Mr. Davidson continued making phone calls and Tyler apologized to departing guests, Rosa walked over to the piano. Up close, she could see the wine still wet on the keys, the sticky residue already starting to dry. Some keys were completely stuck, while others moved, but produced no sound. Rosa had learned basic piano maintenance from Mrs. Peterson, her old teacher. She remembered how to clean keys properly, how to remove moisture from the instrument's interior, how to assess what could be fixed immediately and what needed professional attention. Her hands moved almost without conscious thought, gently lifting the piano's lid to examine the damage inside. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Mr. Davidson appeared beside her, his voice sharp with stress. Rosa turned around, suddenly aware that everyone was looking at her. The customers who hadn't left were watching curiously, probably wondering why the waitress was messing with the expensive piano. Tyler stood nearby, his expression confused. "I'm sorry, Mr. Davidson," Rosa said quietly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I just thought, I know a little about pianos. Maybe I could help clean it up." Mr. Davidson looked at her skeptically. In 3 years of working for him, Rosa had never mentioned knowing anything about music or pianos. To him, she was just the quiet waitress who showed up on time and did her job without complaints. But he was desperate. The evening was already ruined, the piano was damaged, and he had a room full of disappointed customers. What could it hurt to let her try? "Fine," he said with a sigh. Just ... be careful. That piano cost more than most people make in a year." Rosa nodded and turned back to the instrument. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her every move as she carefully examined the keys and the internal mechanisms. The wine had caused less damage than it first appeared. Most of it was surface level, affecting the key action but not the strings or soundboard, working slowly and methodically. Rosa began to clean the wine from the keys and the spaces between them. She used the techniques Mrs. Peterson had taught her years ago, being gentle but thorough. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice how perfect the piano's action was. How responsive the keys felt under her fingers even when she was just cleaning them, without really thinking about it. Rosa pressed down gently on one of the cleaned keys. A pure, clear note rang out in the silent cafe. Then another and another, for she knew it, her fingers were moving across the keys, testing each one to make sure it was working properly, but the testing became something else entirely. The notes she was playing began to form a melody, tentative at first, then growing stronger and more confident. The music that had been locked inside her for so many years was finally finding its way out, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The first few notes floated through the cafe like whispers from another world. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys almost without her permission, testing each one to make sure the wine hadn't damaged them permanently. What started as simple cleaning had somehow turned into something else entirely. She tried to stop herself. This wasn't the time or place. She was just the waitress, just the invisible girl who served coffee and cleaned tables. But the piano keys felt so familiar under her fingertips. So right after years of dreaming about this exact moment, the muscle memory that had been sleeping for so long suddenly woke up, and her hands began to remember what they were born to do. The melody that emerged was soft and gentle at first, like someone humming quietly to themselves. Rosa played the opening of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she had learned when she was 17, just before her world fell apart. Her fingers found the keys instinctively, each note flowing into the next as naturally as breathing. Around her, the cafe had gone completely silent. The customers who had been getting ready to leave stopped putting on their coats. Tyler, who had been packing up his sheet music, froze with his hands halfway to his bag. Mr. Davidson stood behind the counter with his mouth slightly open, his phone call forgotten. But Rosa didn't notice any of this. For the first time in years, she was lost in the music. The cafe disappeared around her, and she was somewhere else entirely, somewhere she had visited only in dreams. Her eyes closed as she played, and the years of sacrifice and struggle melted away with each note. The nocturne filled every corner of the room with its haunting beauty. Rosa's touch was delicate but sure, her timing perfect, despite not having played a real piano in over a decade. The emotion she had kept buried for so long poured out through her fingertips, telling the story of everything she had lost and everything she still hoped for. As the first piece came to an end, Rosa opened her eyes for just a moment. She saw the faces around her, all turned in her direction, all wearing expressions of complete amazement. But instead of stopping, instead of remembering her place and stepping back into the shadows, something inside her decided to keep going. Her fingers moved into the opening of another piece. This time something more contemporary that she had heard on the radio years ago and figured out by ear. She had always been good at that, taking melodies she heard and translating them into piano arrangements. It was a gift her old teacher had marveled at, the ability to hear music once and then recreate it, often making it even more beautiful than the original. The modern song flowed seamlessly into a classical piece by Bach, then into a jazz standard she had learned from an old songbook. Rosa's hands moved across the keys like they had been waiting their whole life for this moment. She played pieces from memory that she hadn't thought about in years, melodies that came back to her as clearly as if she had practiced them just yesterday. With each song, her confidence grew. The hesitation disappeared, replaced by the pure joy of making music again. She began to take risks, adding her own flourishes and interpretations to familiar pieces. Her left hand provided a steady, rolling bass line, while her right hand danced through melodies that seemed to sparkle in the candlelit room. The audience remained completely still, afraid that any movement or sound might break the spell. People had tears in their eyes, moved by the raw emotion in Rosa's playing. Others simply stared in disbelief, unable to process what they were witnessing. The woman who had served them coffee for years, who they had barely noticed, was revealing herself to be an artist of extraordinary talent. Tyler, the conservatory student, listened with professional appreciation and growing amazement. He recognized the technical skill in Rosa's playing, the way she handled complex passages with ease, the natural musicality that couldn't be taught. This wasn't just someone who had taken a few piano lessons. This was someone with real training and genuine talent. Mr. Davidson found himself thinking about all the times Rosa had worked extra shifts without complaining. All the times she had stayed late to help close the cafe, all the times she had been kind to difficult customers. He had always thought of her as a good employee, reliable and hard-working. He had never imagined that she was hiding something like this. As Rosa moved into her final selection, a piece she had composed herself when she was 16, the room seemed to hold its breath. This was music that had never been played for anyone else, a melody she had created during those last happy months before her father got sick. It was hopeful and sad at the same time. It was full of dreams and innocence and the belief that anything was possible. The composition told the story of a girl who dreamed of playing piano on stage, who practiced for hours every day, and imagined herself in concert halls around the world. But it also carried hints of sadness, as if the composer somehow knew that dreams don't always come true, that life has a way of changing plans. When the last note faded away, the silence in the cafe was absolute. Rosa sat at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys, suddenly aware of what she had just done. The protective wall she had built around her hidden life had crumbled completely, and there was no way to put it back up. Slowly, she turned around to face the room. Every person in the cafe was looking at her with expressions she had never seen before. These were the same people who had ordered coffee from her hundreds of times without really seeing her. Now they really saw her, for the first time. The applause started with one person, an elderly woman near the window, who began clapping slowly, tears streaming down her face. Then another person joined in, then another, then seconds. The entire cafe erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. Rosa felt her own tears starting to fall as she stood up from the piano bench. Her legs were shaking, whether from nerves or exhaustion or pure emotion. She couldn't tell. The sound of clapping filled her ears, but it felt distant and dreamlike, like something that was happening to someone else. Tyler was the first to approach her, still clapping as he walked. Over. "That was incredible," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "Where did you learn to play like that? You a professional musician?" Rosa shook her head, not trusting herself to speak yet. The words felt stuck in her throat, all the explanations and stories that would be too complicated to tell. Mr. Davidson appeared beside Tyler. His expression completely changed from the man who had been frantically making phone calls just minutes before. "Rosa," he said, and it was strange to hear him use her name with such respect. "I had no idea. In 3 years, you never mentioned." "I didn't think it mattered," Rosa finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a long time ago." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. It had always mattered. The music had been with her every single day, in every cup of coffee she served, in every table she cleaned, in every moment she spent dreaming about the piano in the corner. It had mattered so much that keeping it secret had nearly broken her heart. The customers began approaching her one by one, introducing themselves properly for the first time, asking questions about her training and her music. For years, she had been invisible to them. Now she was the center of attention. She didn't know how to handle it. But as overwhelming as it was, Rosa felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Music was out now, free from the hiding place where she had kept it locked away. And for the first time since she was 17 years old, she allowed herself to wonder what might be possible. Rosa woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. She rolled over and squinted at the screen, confused by the number of missed calls and text messages. It was only 6 a.m., an hour before her usual alarm. Who could be calling her this early? The first message was from her coworker at the cafe. Rosa, you're famous. Check Facebook. The second was from her neighbor. Saw you on the internet. Amazing. Message after message flooded in from numbers she didn't even recognize. With shaking hands, Rosa opened her social media app. The first thing she saw was a video of herself playing piano, taken from someone's phone at the cafe the night before. The caption read, "You won't believe what happened at this coffee shop last night." The waitress shocked everyone. The video already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. Rosa scrolled through them with growing disbelief. "This gave me chills," wrote one person. "She's incredible," said another. "Someone needs to sign this girl to a record deal." More videos had been posted from different angles around the cafe. In one, she could see herself from behind, completely absorbed in the music. In another, the camera captured the audience's amazed faces as they listened. Each video had been shared dozens of times, spreading across the internet like wildfire. Rosa's phone rang, startling her out of her trance. It was Mr. Davidson. "Rosa, I hope I didn't wake you," he said, his voice excited in a way she had never heard before. "Have you seen what's happening online? The cafe's phone has been ringing all morning. Local news stations want to interview you," the mayor's office called. Even some music industry people have reached out. Rosa felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Just yesterday she was invisible, and now strangers on the internet were talking about her, Mr. Davidson. "I don't understand what's happening." "What's happening is that you're talented, Rosa. Really talented. And now the whole world is starting to see it." He paused, and when he spoke again, his tone was more businesslike. "Listen, I have a proposition for you. What if you became our evening pianist? 3 nights a week, good pay, and you could still work your regular shifts if you want the extra income." Rosa sat up in bed, her heart pounding. "You want me to play piano at the cafe? Professionally? I've never seen anything like what happened last night. People were calling this morning asking when you're performing again. Rosa, you could help us become the most popular venue in the city." After hanging up, Rosa sat in her small room, trying to process everything. She could hear her mother moving around in the kitchen, probably making breakfast before her dialysis appointment. Diego was already up, getting ready for school. Her family needed her income from the cafe. Could she really risk changing everything? By noon, the situation had gotten even more intense. A reporter from the local news station knocked on her door, asking for an interview. Rosa politely declined, still too overwhelmed to speak publicly. But the attention kept growing. The most surprising call came from Dr. Patricia Williams, a retired music professor who had been in the cafe audience the night before. Her voice was warm and kind when Rosa answered the phone. "My dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Mr. Davidson. I had to speak with you about last night." "Oh, hello," Rosa said nervously. She remembered seeing an elegant, older woman in the front row, someone who had seemed to really understand the music. "I taught piano at the university for 35 years before I retired. In all that time, I rarely encountered natural talent like yours. Your technique is remarkable, but more than that, you have something that can't be taught. You have soul in your playing." Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her about music this way. Dr. Williams continued. "I'd like to help you if you're willing. I still have connections in the music world, orchestras, recording studios, concert venues, people who should hear you play." "Dr. Williams, I appreciate that, but I'm not sure I'm ready for anything like that. I haven't had formal training in years, and I have responsibilities. ... double quotes. Of course, my dear. But talent like yours shouldn't stay hidden. Perhaps we could start small. I could give you some coaching, help you prepare. No pressure. Just an opportunity to explore what might be possible." That afternoon, Rosa went to work as usual, but everything was different. Customers who had ignored her 4 years now recognized her and wanted to talk. Some asked for autographs. Others wanted to take selfies with her. The attention felt strange and overwhelming, Tyler. The young pianist from the night before stopped by during the afternoon. "I couldn't stop thinking about your performance," he said, ordering a coffee and sitting at the counter. "I'm studying at the conservatory, and I've never heard anyone play with such emotion. It was like you were telling your life story through the music." Rosa blushed, wiping down the counter nervously. "Thank you," You played beautifully too, before the accident. I've been classically trained since I was 5, Tyler said. But what you did last night, that wasn't just training. That was something. Deeper? Have you ever thought about applying to music school? There are scholarships for adult students, especially ones with your level of ability. The idea seemed impossible to Rosa. I can't afford school, and I have family obligations. There are ways to make it work. Evening programs, financial aid, work-study opportunities. I could introduce you to some of the professors. As her shift continued, Rosa found herself thinking about all these new possibilities. For years, she had accepted that her musical dreams were over, that her life would be about serving others and making ends meet. But now people were telling her that maybe it didn't have to be that way. The evening rush brought even more attention. Word had spread through social media. People were coming to the cafe specifically hoping to hear Rosa play again. Mr. Davidson had set up a small sign, evening piano performance, 8 p.m. When 8 o'clock arrived, the cafe was packed. Every table was full, and people stood along the walls, all waiting to hear the waitress who had become an overnight sensation. Rosa felt nervous in a way she hadn't the night before, when the performance had been spontaneous and unplanned. But as soon as she sat down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys, the nervousness disappeared. The music took over again. Just like it had the night before, she played some of the same pieces, but also tried new ones, feeding off the energy of the audience. After her performance, Rosa was approached by several people with business cards. A talent agent from Los Angeles, a representative from a record label, the director of the city's symphony orchestra. Each one wanted to talk about opportunities, about contracts, about the future. Walking home that night, Rosa's mind was spinning. In less than 24 hours, her entire life had changed. The quiet, invisible existence she had known for years was gone, replaced by possibilities she had never dared to imagine at home. She found her mother waiting up for her, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. "Mia," her mother said softly. "Mrs. Rodriguez from next door showed me the videos on her phone. I saw you playing piano." Rosa sat down across from her mother, suddenly feeling like a child again. "Mama, I'm sorry I never told you. I know we had to sell the keyboard, and I know music wasn't practical, but I never stopped thinking about it." Her mother reached across the table and took Rosa's hand. "Your father would be so proud. He always said you had a gift. Made me promise, before he died, that someday you would get to use that gift. But what about Diego's school? Your medical bills? I can't just abandon everything for a dream that might not work out. Dreams aren't luxuries, Mia. They're what make us human. Your music last night, it reminded me of something I had forgotten. That there's beauty in this world, even when things are hard." Rosa squeezed her mother's hand, feeling a weight she had carried for years beginning to lift. Maybe it was possible to have both, to take care of her family and also take care of the music that lived inside her heart. The phone buzzed with another message, another opportunity, another person who wanted to help her turn her hidden talent into something real. For the first time in years, Rosa allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story was just beginning. 6 months later, Rosa stood backstage at the Grand Theater, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down her black concert dress. Through the heavy curtains, she could hear the murmur of the audience settling into their seats. The biggest night of her life, her debut performance with the City Symphony Orchestra, the journey to this moment had been like living in a dream. After that life-changing night at the cafe, everything had moved so quickly it sometimes felt unreal. Dr. Williams had kept her promise, introducing Rosa to important people in the music world. The symphony conductor Maestro Johnson had been skeptical at first when Dr. Williams told him about a waitress who could play piano like a professional. But when Rosa auditioned for him 3 months ago, playing the same Chopin nocturne that had started everything, Maestro Johnson's doubts disappeared immediately. "Where have you been hiding?" he'd asked after she finished. "This is exactly the kind of fresh talent our orchestra needs." The months of preparation had been intense, but wonderful. Rosa continued working at the cafe 3 days a week, now as their featured evening pianist. The crowds kept coming, drawn by the story of the waitress who had shocked everyone with her hidden talent. Mr. Davidson had even put her picture on the cafe's website with the headline "From Coffee Cups to Concert Halls." Dr. Williams had become more than a mentor. She had become like a second mother to Rosa. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Rosa went to Dr. Williams's beautiful home for intensive coaching sessions. They worked on technique, interpretation, and stage presence. Dr. Williams also helped Rosa navigate the complex world of professional music, teaching her about contracts, agents, and how to protect herself in an industry that could be both wonderful and dangerous. The hardest part hadn't been the music. It had been learning to balance her new opportunities with her family responsibilities. Rosa had been terrified that pursuing her dreams would mean abandoning Diego and her mother. But Dr. Williams had helped her find solutions she never knew existed. Through Dr. Williams' connections, Rosa learned about a scholarship program for adult students returning to music. The program not only covered tuition costs, but also provided a monthly stipend for living expenses. Rosa was able to enroll in evening classes at the university, working toward the music degree she had dreamed about as a teenager. Even better, the symphony orchestra had a community outreach program that paid musicians to teach music lessons in schools. Rosa now spent 2 mornings a week teaching piano to children in Diego's school district. The extra income, combined with her cafe performances and symphony work, actually provided more financial security than her old full-time waitressing job. Diego had been Rosa's biggest supporter through everything. Now 15 years old, he had started taking piano lessons himself, inspired by his sister's success. "I want to learn to play like you," he had told her. Maybe not professionally, but just for fun. Watching Diego discover music for himself had been one of Rosa's greatest joys. Their mother's health had actually improved over the past months. The stress of financial worry had lifted, and she seemed younger and happier than she had been in years. "Music is medicine," she often told Rosa. "Not just for the people who listen, but for the family of the musician too." Tonight's concert was special for many reasons. Rosa would be performing the Chopin Nocturne that had changed her life. But she would also debut her own composition, a piece she had written about her journey from the cafe to the concert hall. She had titled it "Hidden Dreams," and it told the story of talent waiting patiently to be discovered, as Rosa waited in the wings. She thought about how much had changed since that rainy Thursday evening 6 months ago. The scared, invisible waitress felt like a different person now. Rosa had learned to speak up for herself, to believe in her own worth, to take up space in rooms where she had once tried to disappear. The symphony had become her second family. The other musicians had welcomed her warmly, curious about her unusual path to professional music. Some were amazed that she had maintained such skill, despite years away from formal training. Others were inspired by her story of second chances and dreams deferred but not destroyed. Tyler, the young conservatory student who had been playing the night everything changed, had become a good friend. He often joked that spilling wine on the piano was the best accident of his career. "If I hadn't knocked over that glass, the world might never have discovered you," he would say. Tyler was in the audience tonight. Having driven 3 hours from the conservatory to hear Rosa's symphony debut, Mr. Davidson was there too. Sitting in the front row with several regular customers from the cafe, he had closed the restaurant early so his entire staff could attend the concert. "Rosa put us on the map," he had told a newspaper reporter. "The least we can do is show up to cheer her on." Dr. Williams sat with Rosa's family, having insisted on buying tickets for her mother and Diego in the best section of the theater. Over the months, Dr. Williams had become like a grandmother to Diego, helping him with his own musical studies, and telling him stories about Rosa's rapid progress. 5 minutes to curtain, the stage manager whispered to Rosa. Her heart rate quickened. But it was excitement now, not fear. She had performed dozens of times over the past months, but never with a full orchestra, never in a venue this grand. Rosa walked to the edge of the curtain and peeked out at the audience. The theater was completely full, over 1,000 people waiting to hear her play. She spotted familiar faces scattered throughout the crowd, cafe customers who had become fans, music students from the university, reporters who had followed her story in the front row. She could see her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, already emotional before the music had even started. Diego sat beside her, looking proud and nervous at the same time. Dr. Williams caught Rosa's eye and gave her an encouraging nod. The orchestra members took their places on stage, the sound of tuning instruments filling the air. Maestro Johnson appeared beside Rosa, resplendent in his formal tails. "Ready?" he asked with a smile. Rosa nodded, feeling calmer than she had expected. The music was ready. She was ready. They walked onto the stage together, and the audience erupted. In applause, Rosa took her place at the grand piano, a magnificent instrument that made even the beautiful cafe piano seem small by comparison. The orchestra members raised their instruments, waiting for the conductor's signal. As Maestro Johnson raised his baton, Rosa placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for just a moment. She thought about her father, who had believed in her music from the very beginning. She thought about all the nights she had dreamed of this moment while serving coffee to people who couldn't see her. She thought about the scared young woman who had almost let fear keep her silent forever. The conductor's baton came down, and Rosa began to play. The familiar opening notes of the Chopin Nocturne floated through the concert hall, but this time, they were supported by the rich sounds of violins, cellos, and woodwinds. The music she had played alone in the cafe was now part of something bigger, something magnificent. As the piece progressed, Rosa felt the same joy she had experienced that first night, but magnified 100 times. This was what music was meant to be, not just notes on a page, but emotion shared between human hearts. Dreams made audible, hope given voice. When the final note faded away, the silence lasted only a moment before the audience exploded into applause. Rosa stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face as she looked out at the crowd of people celebrating her journey. She was no longer the invisible waitress. She was Rosa the pianist, Rosa the composer, Rosa the woman who had found the courage to let her light shine, and this was just the beginning.